FC3, and thank you so much for joining us today as we celebrate our Founders Day. So many of us, including myself, we were either at the beginning too young to know what happened in the very beginning, or we met along this journey a little bit later. But today I wanted to be able to interview my mom, Pastor Kay, and my uncle, Elder Barry, as they were two of the founding members to bring you First Christian. So just to give a little background, like for myself, I was only 3, Ricky was only 9, so we don't remember anything. Pastor Queen's twins, they were just being born or something, because they're about the same age. Yeah. So we have grown up here, and that's about as much as we know. So what was it like for you all who was with Dad? Like, how did we get to this? How did we get to let's start a church?
Well, it started really with, he was feeling uncomfortable. We were in the United Methodist system, and there were certain, I guess, doctrinal beliefs and so forth that didn't necessarily line up with what he believed and how he understood the scriptures. So he decided, he just felt that he needed to, leave. And so we didn't know at first where we were going. He just said, look, I'm gonna resign, and for right now, we're just gonna go back home to our home church. We'll just choose. We'll go back to our home church, and we'll just wait there and see, what God has for us and where we're gonna go. So in the meantime, we were living here in this basement, because we moved in here after my father passed, your granddad. And we were living here, and he had gone out on a couple of interviews. He had interviewed with the AME church, he had interviewed with the Baptist church. Or I don't know if you want to say interview, but he was, I guess, doing informational, just going to get some information from a couple of the bishops. And but he still wasn't quite sure which way to go. That's when he said, maybe we just go back to our home church. So in the midst of all of that, I went to him and I just said, because I just really felt, really heavy. And I was like, I said, Rick, I don't think you're supposed to be going somewhere to go sit down for now. I mean, you are a pastor. And so I think that's what you're supposed to be doing. And so he looked at me and he gave this big sigh of relief. And he said, Karen, I didn't know how to tell you this, but I felt that the Lord was telling me to start a church, but I didn't know how to say it to you, because you and I made a pact back in '84 that we would not ever start a church. That's something that we would not do. We were both in agreement. We're not doing that. So he didn't know how to tell me, but as it would have it, Lord, I guess did a work with my little heart, and I said it to him, and so that freed him to, okay, then that's what we're gonna do.
So a pact to not start a church, but we're celebrating 30 years in a church.
The Lord has a sense of humor, what can I say?
So Uncle, for you, y'all were good friends. Like, what was that like? Did he come to you and say, like, I want to start a church? Like, what happened?
Well, I remember that at the time it was Pastor John Wesley. It's kind of funny, in my own personal life, I was looking for a church.
Okay.
So I would go to John Wesley for Bible study. I would drop in on service every now and then. So he did eventually come up to me, just not out of the clear blue, but kind of in a way of saying, I got something to tell you. And he said something like, don't laugh, but, hear me out. And that's when he told me he felt that God had led him to start a church. Now, I knowing who he was married to, found this a bit surprising.
See, I know we're going to go there today on that.
It wasn't a surprise that he felt led to start a church, but I never envisioned that. I thought he would, since he was already in the United Methodist, I saw him as growing in the United Methodist and maybe end up pastoring a larger church as it went by. But the more he talked, the more I realized how he was beginning to be uncomfortable with the United Methodist Church. With some of the things that were happening, even in his own personal life, as far as education and all this kind of things, and feeling adequate to move within the United Methodist, not feeling like he had an equal equality or equal chance of advancing. Or whatever.
Yeah.
So when he told me that, and after he told me that Karen was on board for it, I said, okay. I said, well, where do we go from here? I mean, to start a church. And then for me, when you think of starting a church, my mind goes to the storefront churches.
Right.
And some storefront churches remain storefront churches forever. So, I just couldn't see him in that setting necessarily. But yeah, that's pretty much that.
Okay, so with us being back in the basement where it all started, like, what was that meeting when y'all first came together, like the board? Who was on the board, and like who was at that meeting?
Well, the initial meeting, there wasn't no board.
It wasn't a board,
okay.
right?
It was just a group of us here called together, kind of laid out what his thought process would be in starting a church. He had a lot of notes. He had a lot of stuff to share with us, but it wasn't like the first meeting wasn't like he laid it all out.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't even think he knew everything that needed to be done. I remember him even going to people he felt were mentors to get their input on how to start a church or what have you. There were some things that he had laid out for us, and looking at them.
He went to Agnes Austin,
Yes.
Reverend Agnes Austin.
Where's she from?
Gillis Memorial.
Gillis Memorial.
Okay.
And he went to her for advice on, sharing his vision, sharing that he felt that this is what the Lord was doing, and he wanted to get some advice from her, and she did. She was, he said to her, he felt God wanted us to be in Annapolis. It will be a church teaching the gospel of Jesus Christ practically, where people can relate to it. And so she was, her advice was trying to, position your church, on a bus line so people can easily access it and so forth. But when we gathered here, like Barry said, he was casting a vision.
Okay.
We weren't the board. He had just called together just some of us. It was Pastor Glenn Queen, Camilla Holmes, Denise Neals, Stephanie Beckett.
Was Uncle Craig in the initial?
Craig was in, yes.
Okay.
Craig, he was in the first one. Like Mother Maggie, Arlene, Ann came like in March. Like we started in February. So
Okay.
the first meeting was in February. Next meeting was in March. And that's when they came on board. And I think Zena and Joe came on board around. So the rest of them came on board within March.
Okay. So was he meeting to, I guess, get to know what you all thought, or was he meeting to help to help execute it?
A little
Does
bit
that make
both.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was all of the above.
I remember one of the meetings, because we were getting everybody was getting excited. I think as he shared.
Oh, the first one.
Yeah, everybody was excited. We had planned some outings where we would go out and share what the vision was. So I think we had one at Ralph Bunch, I thought, and invited some people in.
Oh, okay.
Just to listen to what we were talking about, the vision he had for First Christian. I can't remember when the name First Christian came up. Was that initially?
That was his because he had talked to Pastor Agnes Austin, who was part of the Christian Community Church Council in Baltimore. We were going to be connected to the Christian Community Church Council, and he was going in that direction because the Christian Community Council is an independent council where each church operates independently. They're autonomous, but you still have this covering, if you will. And so, because we will be the first Christian community church in Annapolis, that's where the name came from.
Okay, so put a pin there because that brings me to more questions. More questions. I don't know if we have time enough. All right, so Okay, so he brought all of y'all together to talk about what he had casted this vision. Okay, so all right, so we got past all of that. Now we get into the first service.
Okay.
What was that like? Where was it, one? And like, what was that like? How did you get people? Like, give us the rundown.
Well, even before the first service, we had to still get some things in order as a committee.
Okay.
As a group, like I think we set up three areas. One was worship, one was administration, the other one was Christian ed.
Okay.
So we had those areas picked up and put together. We still went out and shared our vision with other people to get them geared up. We decided that our first service would be the first Sunday in July,
Right.
and it was held at Holiday Inn.
Okay.
Which is down the Doubletree.
Down the Doubletree.
All right.
It's the same building, pretty much
Everything.
same setup, but it was the name.
Well, we always have banquets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, by the time we had our first service, see, each one of us still belonged to other churches during this time, from February up to whatever. Some of us still belong to other churches. We decided, when we had our meetings, that we would start tithing to First Christian.
Okay.
So that was going to be our church. So First Christian started we started giving the First Christian, we set up an account for the church. By the time we got to our first service in July, we had enough money to pay for our first Sunday in July. And after that, other people would join and they would start tithing. So the tithing for the church was set up from the original members to have enough money to have a place to stay as we carried.
So you all really planned it out, literally. It wasn't just we're jumping
Well, no.
to do it because God said we're gonna do it.
Right. No, yeah, you have to be strategic about it, and it's all about timing as well. He set the 1st of July because that was how we operated, because we came out of United Methodist, and so whenever you start a new assignment in United Methodist, it always starts on the first Sunday in July. So that's why the first Sunday in July was for us, because his contract with the United Methodist ended the last Sunday in June. So he wanted to make sure that he fulfilled his responsibility and commitment to the United Methodist Church, because it's important that you do things in order, and as we call kingdom order, that always be drilling in
Kingdom order.
to your head and to Rick's head.
Kingdom order.
You got
If we
to do
know
stuff in
nothing
order.
else, we know you have to
Kingdom
do it in order.
Yeah, man. You mess up and don't do that, you can find yourself, in a difficult situation. So he had a commitment, and so he fulfilled his commitment at John Wesley. And John Wesley was an awesome church. I just want to point that out. That was Ricky's first appointment. We were there for 11 years. I mean, they saw the babies born, they saw the wedding, they saw the babies born. It was really a great congregation to start out with. So, us leaving John Wesley had nothing to do with John Wesley at all. It was really a great congregation, and it was those 11 years. They were good years. Yeah, but as far as the planning, yeah, as Barry said, everything was planned out until even when we got up to that first service, and there was still certain things that had to develop. You know what I mean? Because he was trying to break some of those what we call non-biblical traditions, like chicken dinners and pew rallies and fundraising. That's where the tithing thing came in.
We had service beginning at 10 because that's
Not
the time they could get us in.
Yeah.
So that didn't just that had nothing to do. And we just stuck at 10 o'clock.
We stayed at 10 o'clock until the clock worked,
So 10 o'clock is because that's the only reason they could get
That's the
in
time
to Holiday Inn. So welcome to 10 a.m. service, everybody.
Yeah, but the first service, we saw it was a little over 100
It
people.
was about 100.
We came-
I remember it was like 131. or
Yeah,
something
somewhere.
like that.
And this was before social media.
Right.
Yeah.
So how'd you all even get the people?
We had
Word of
we did a
mouth.
press release.
Press release, word of mouth. And we went out. I keep saying about a bunch. I know there were other places we went to just to share the vision. And
Yeah.
then we had Bible study periodically.
Yeah, we did. But Rock Bunch is the one that's the informational session we did at Ralph Bunch, to me, that's the one that stands out most to me. But I know that's the one where we put together, I mean, we even had on display with the curriculum for the Sunday school, but that was going to be, all of that was on display, so people, when they come in, they saw, this is where we were going, and this is how we're gonna get there.
Also, remember, among the ones he called in, we kind of knew each other, but we didn't know each other.
Okay.
Some of us knew each other from Unity.
Okay,
From
from the play.
Unity play group. Some of us knew each other just from John Wesley and seeing it, but we had never together as a group came together to do anything like this. So from February to July, that took us time to get to know each other. We started having birthday celebrations for people during that period. I remember one time we had cake and all this for somebody's birthday, and we would come in, we would have pizza.
Is this
like
when
that.
Ricky used to get the pizza or
Yeah.
something like that during the
He was a
meeting?
pizza guy, yeah,
Yeah.
he'd be the pizza man.
So-
Bring the pizza down.
So it was a time of getting to know each other even as we were able to go out and things. Also during this period, didn't Ricky write
The bylaws?
yeah.
Yeah, he had the bylaws written out. I remember one, he spent one night.
He did overnight
That's how
almost.
crazy it was, yeah.
I remember
He
that.
was sitting out here on the sofa and he wrote out the entire bylaws.
That's a lot.
And this was no laptop days.
Yep.
He was in by hand. He wrote that out. When I got up, here he had it. You know, he would get up in the middle of the night and do stuff anyway. You know, I don't know.
That I remember.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if you saw that cartoon I having my bathroom
Yes.
peanuts. Yeah. You just wake up in the middle of the night and yeah.
Scrap pieces of paper.
Yeah.
Now I also remember before the first Sunday in July, the original board members were set up. Like
Okay.
he kind of not offered. It was almost like a gifting, saying we would be the original board. Nothing would ever change that. You would never be taken off the board. I remember a few years later, there was some question about that, and remember Ms. Poole spoke up and said, "No, you told us we would be permanent board members, so that never changed." So the original 12 was always the permanent board member.
Gotcha.
And that's the awesome thing about the board is the original members are the original members and we're still here.
Yeah.
And the only separation has been through death. But through the 30 years, the original board are all still at First Christian.
So in a way, I guess you could say that you all follow the vision more than the man.
That's the key, you know, when and his death proved that, you know, his death proves or shows who was there for the vision of the church or who was there for the man. And let me just clarify that too, because sometimes a person may be there for the man and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. It means that was the part that they were supposed to play in that whole process. You know what I mean? So a lot of it had to do with how you left and what happened in between time, because after he passed and, you know, I remember right after he passed, we started getting applications in for his position. Yeah, I mean, I remember a fax coming in, and I was at church, and a fax came in while I was there, and you know, we understand you have an opening.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah. So anyway, that came through, and that was a difficult time. That was a really, really, really difficult time because it's like we went from your father had been sick for a while, which you knew. It really started in 2000.
Right.
And then when he finally passed, when he did pass, which was in March 9th, and then, you know, after I stepped forward, that's when the winds
And the waves
and the waves.
started flowing.
You know, also when you think of the board back then, we just thought of, you know, the board was the board, and it was us together. You never realized the importance of the board was when that transition did happen, and all of the weight of everything that was happening didn't have to lay on one person.
Gotcha.
Even though Pastor Queen stepped up, thank God, it was like the interim for a period of while. He still had the board supporting him, even when Pastor K got the calling and spoke up. She had the board that supported her. Now, the board was solid. It shook. Don't get me wrong. It shook us, but the board was solid, and the board was the board even afterwards. Even though it went through the transitioning and the changes that all happened and what have you, the board was still the board. It's like God chose the right people to be on that board.
Yeah, I was just about to say that because, I mean, you all had to grow with each other all those years just to be that strong to get us to where we are now.
Yeah, it was critical. And like Barry said, you don't realize how critical the board was and the individuals on the board, those original board members at that particular time, because if the board had crumbled, you know, the board had scattered or whatever. I don't know, you know, we were in a brand new church, had just moved in on New Year's Eve, and here you're talking about 3 months later, the founding pastor's gone, so you have a church that was really built and centered around a particular leader, you know what I mean? So I don't know what would have happened if the board had crumbled, as he said.
Because keep in mind,
it might be a for sale sign up.
keep in mind, it was still only 10 years. 10 years isn't a long time. It's not a long
30
time.
years is not a long time for a church.
No, it's not. So 10 years, and I remember thinking, I remember the building going up, and I knew Pastor was sick too. But the building was going up, and I remember saying, this thing is going up, man. There's nothing we can do about it. It's like it had a mind of its own. It was going up no matter what.
You can't stop it.
We had issues. We had issues with the bank. And the Lord guided us through that. How, like you say, you look back and wonder how you got over. You know, He sent us some good people
What's
that
the
helped.
saying? God take care of fools and babies.
Yes.
And we weren't babies.
No.
Grandma says that often.
No.
Woo! Boy.
So, all right. So, looking at the church now, we've made it to 30. Like, is this anything that you ever imagined?
No. I remember we was talking about building a church. I was thinking of a nice little church, somewhere, you know, where we could have like a couple of hundred people in and be happy, you know, nice reasonable mortgage. Instead, we get this big church with a $28,000 a month mortgage, and our congregation was teetering. We were losing people, you know. And we still had the $28,000 a month. Not that the tithes and the money, you know, you're not supposed to put emphasis on money. But we had our signature on a mortgage for $28,000.
And he was gone.
And he was gone.
And I was feeling some kind of way about that.
He was gone.
That was 20 years ago.
Yeah, that was $28,000, and that's not including electricity and the utilities and salaries. That's just the mortgage was $28,000.
The makeup. And
Y'all can take a deep breath. That's a lot to take in.
No,
You can take a
it's
deep
sweat.
breath. That's a lot.
I remember looking at churches smaller than ours and say, see, we could have had this church.
Well, remember, we thought, even Ricky, remember initially, we thought, we'd probably get a church maybe 250.
Yeah,
you know, we were
that
thinking
was the
around that
deal.
age. And the big growth spurt, it was one New Year's Eve, we were over in the Lincoln Court,
Okay.
what we call the resource building. And I'll never forget, we walked in one New Year's Eve for service, and the little place was packed.
Yeah. Fire marshal came through there and wiped us
It
out.
was like, where did these people come from? Honestly, it was, where did the people come from? We didn't know half of them. And that's during that time, that's when Miss Peggy Diggs and some of them came. They came in through with that particular group, with that crowd. And it was Miss Diggs who had said to us, you're not gonna build a church for $250, you're gonna need more than that. She was the one, I distinctly remember her, she said no. And look what happened.
So, I don't even know if I have a question for that. That's a lot.
It was. I
Right.
mean, like you said, to start off, you know, your question was, did you see this where we
Yeah.
are now? I can't say I saw this. I never thought. I always thought it was going to succeed. I just never knew what success looked like.
And if we saw it, we didn't see it without looking.
Exactly.
Okay,
Oh yeah,
okay.
You know,
definitely.
it just
So
Yeah.
definitely him not
that-
being a part of the
Was not
equation
even
was never.
no, that wasn't even a
Okay.
consideration.
Okay. So
so it goes back to the adage: "It's good God doesn't tell you everything." Because
Oh.
God had told me then what it was going to take to get to where we are now.
Who said no?
I was about to say, "Okay, God, I'm good."
I'm gonna say it would have been really easy to say no. Like if he really had put down everything
Oh
and
yeah.
told you everything that was gonna happen or you were gonna go against,
Right.
that's
No.
that's a lot.
Yeah, it is. It is a lot. And no, we would have said, mm-mm. There was no way in the world. We saw all of this, we wouldn't have done that. This was too much. It would have been too much.
But as the years went by, we had, like, even with the original 12, as the years went by, God sent us people that, you know, because, you know, when you're a close group, you're kind of leery of anything coming to add to that group or whatever. And I remember Ricky telling us, there are people who's going to come into this ministry that is going to help this ministry. You have to be open to that. It can't be just us. So as time went by, we saw how the Lord added to the church. And not just added, but added people who had a willingness to carry the ministry on, who had skills and things to carry it on. Because lo and behold, when we first started, I was head of finance. And I think that was mainly because I worked at a bank. I could add and subtract, and that was just about it. That was just about it. But when you get into building a church and what have you, and finances, I found out there were more than just having a ledger and all of this. That's when Ms. Diggs came along with her accounting background, and you know, I was in my feelings a little bit because I was like, this is my thing, and no, but she showed us how, you know, the books should be set up. What the banks we started learning what the banks would be looking at. One thing he used to always tell us, everything we do, let's document. Let's have a history of what we do. So that when we were ready to go, when we were ready to purchase land or what have you, when the bank needed information, we had history. We could show them this is what we've done. This is how we got to where we are now. So he, and administratively, I mean, the man could preach. But administratively, he had that too. Knew what it was to.
He was very gifted.
Yeah.
He was definitely gifted in administration. He carried out. But like Barry said, you know, with the board, with the expansion of the board, that's what we did. We ended up expanding the board so that you can bring on fresh blood. And I mean, over the years, we've always had good people on the board. Even, you know, right now we have great people who are on the board. They bring in that expertise, they understand the vision, you know what I mean? And then at the same time, you don't want a board filled with people who are gonna be yes people. You want people who are gonna ask questions, who are going to, you know, offer different viewpoints, because it causes you to think. Because sometimes you don't think of a certain thing, you know, and take somebody else to come in and say, oh, have you thought about this? And so our board meetings, they might be lengthy sometimes because we cover a lot, but we have never ever had a contentious board meeting, ever in 30 years. I mean, you talk about some old churches, other churches sometimes, and they talk about their board meeting. I remember back in the day, you know, board meeting was, you already know it was going to be a 3-ring circus. You already know it was going to be a battle. They went to church, they went to the board meeting ready to fight, you know. But we never had that. We never in 30 years had that kind of conflict or tension in the board. I'm not saying that we didn't have different viewpoints, but we were always able to talk through them. And I think the main reason why it worked out this way was because from the very beginning, he pushed that to be on any ministry, you had to be in Bible study. You have to be in study. And then when you start laying that foundation of how to strengthen your relationship with Jesus Christ and being in relationship with each other, then when you come into a board meeting, you come in already with that mentality, if you will, that, you know, we're going to sit and work through what we need to work through. But we've always had, we never had a bad board meeting.
So with, I want to back up just a little bit. So, okay, so my recollection, I don't really start remembering anything until Beacon Light.
Okay.
So Beacon, I don't even know what year that, we probably have been together for years by then.
Is that 95?
But Beacon Light is what I remember.
Yeah.
95?
So, and I remember the 3 services we used to have. So what, like, where did they come from? Is that from the word of mouth too? But that was a little later.
Oh, as we were rolling, people had heard of First Christian, and people knew Ricky.
Okay.
Just he had that personality. Once you heard him, everybody kind of knew him and would want to come to hear him and things. And you used to hear how he's able to preach the practical gospel. Everybody, they said you didn't leave out there scratching your head wondering what he was saying.
Right.
Before Beacon Light, we were at the Holiday Inn.
No, we was down Ralph Bunch for a bit.
Yeah, we were out.
We were winning.
Around them Space Heaters.
It was cold as mud.
we were around Ralph Bunch for a minute. Lincoln Court. Remember we built that little area, that
Yeah,
pulpit
that
area?
came up, and for a short time, at least we would have, we had meetings or something, because remember, Bishop Coates had a location off of
George?
no, Gibraltar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gibraltar.
and we were there. I mean, we didn't have services there. I think we had a New Year's Eve service there. I definitely remember we had a meeting there, but I don't remember how much time we spent there. I don't think it was a lot. And then we went to Beacon Light, and
Beacon Light was just so that Beacon Light was a blessing because it was a 7-day Adventist church, so they had their services on Saturdays. We had ours on Sundays, so we still stuck with the 10 o'clock. We were able to go in there and have service. It was a small. I don't think Beacon Light held. Well,
that's why we had 3 services.
yeah, it was.
What was it, like 7:30 something and then 10?
7,
or
10,
11?
and 12.
Okay.
7, 10, and 12. So we would have those three services. And that kind of helped, but people who came to the 7:30 would stay for the, we couldn't get people to leave. So by the time 12 came, it was really packed in there. But some would leave, but for the most part, a lot of people stayed for all 3 services. And he would preach the same one all 3 services. He would change up.
No,
right?
yeah, no, he had 3 different services.
Yeah.
Sermons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right, so he might be in one series for the 7 o'clock sermon
Right.
service, but he might be doing a whole different series for the 10 o'clock. So he had 3, and that did not include if he had an invitation to preach outside.
Oh yeah.
So that would be a
Yeah.
3 o'clock, 4 o'clock,
Yeah.
evening service.
That's a lot to have to prepare for.
Yeah,
But
but that's
I guess
how
that
he
was his
did
love,
it.
so it
Yeah,
became a
that's
little
how he
easier.
did it. Yeah,
And I think he wrote sermons on anything.
he did.
He did. He used to write them on the way to church. Remember on McDonald's napkins, we'd be writing down.
Yeah.
So if you started at First Christian at Beacon Light days, go ahead and put in the comments where you started. If it was Beacon Light Southern or where we are now, that'd be good to see how many people are still here or what happened or where they came along the journey. But
The church is organic. So what First Christian looked like in 1991 is not what it looked like in 2001. It's not what it looked like in 2010. And definitely where we are now, it doesn't look like it. So it changes, but you do have the, what was that book we did? This is not your grandmother's this is not your father's church or something.
Yeah.
Samuel Chan was the author of it, and he was talking about immigrants and natives, and the natives are the ones who were there from the very beginning, and the immigrants are the ones who came in. And he was just talking about how you have to integrate the immigrants and the natives, and I think right now, to be honest, it's more people who came. We have more people who came after Johnson,
right.
than those who were here. Because I sit there and look at it, Johnson pastored First Christian for 10 years.
You
I've
passed
had
it
for 20.
Yeah, you've had it for longer. So, okay.
Also, I remember him always telling us where you, back then, where you are now is probably not where you're going to be 10, 20
Right.
years from now. Your roles are going to change. And we've seen where our roles change. I mean, that was First Lady for a little bit. Pastor Queen and I were deacons and things, and we had to grow to where we are now. I was board chairman. I'm no longer board chairman. Got someone to take that over. So it's just different things that happen during the church, and you have to be flexible enough to move with the flow, to move with it as it grows.
So, of course, it's our hope, prayer, desire that First Christian is here for another 30 years. What would you pray it would look like?
That I'm there. No. 30 years.
I mean, yeah.
In my chair,
We pray that
in
we're
the
all
corner.
there.
90 what? 95, 96, 97 years old. You still might be there.
You be
30,
90
another 30 years.
Yeah, we need 95,
94.
94,
I've
95.
been sitting there looking for my teeth.
We'd be 60 something. Oh, Lord.
Oh,
But
Lord.
what would you hope that it looks like? Because the natives, we will be moseying on out. So it'll be now.
Wow, that's a good question. That's a real good question, especially within the current climate that we're in, because we really don't know what church is going to look like next year. We don't know what it's going to look like in the fall. We don't even have to get to next year. We definitely know that there has been a dramatic paradigm shift in the church and how we church. Definitely church has gone back to the basics. I'm thinking it's going to be even more so. Definitely believe there's going to be more of a gathering. Because it just has to be before Jesus. I don't know when Jesus come back. He ain't come back yet. I think it has to be another great revival. You know what I mean? Because the word says that God doesn't want anyone to perish. And so, with that being said, I believe there's going to be another great opportunity where there will be a moral shift in the world, cultural shift, if you will, a spiritual shift. And I believe there's that moral revival will come about. So, what the church is going to look like as we go in the future, I think it may be more decentralized.
What do you mean?
Where everything is not right at the church.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Where even as far as outreach is concerned, now we know outreach is evangelizing out in the community, but I'm talking about more where the church is more in a position of supporting like nonprofits that are in line with the vision of the church. So they're giving us support there, as opposed to the church trying to develop that particular program or entity under its umbrella. You know what I'm saying? So you kind of spreading out.
So literally going beyond the walls.
Going beyond the walls, right. Even as far as, I think we're going to see more of virtual churches where you're going to have people who are in different locations. So the challenge, of course, is how do you bring them into the corporate setting, physical setting, but at the same time as people are being very transit and moving about. So I think the church has to be very, very open. And I think right now where God is taking us and taking us through is getting rid of all of that, all of the things that we were doing that we thought was necessary, that this moment where we are now is showing it was not necessary. You didn't need to do all of that. You know what I mean? It's not so much about rituals. Rituals have their place. But when you're so banked on, we got to do this at that certain time, you know what I mean? We have to do this, 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 and this. And you're dismissing what's happening out in the community. You're dismissing what's going on in the world. The church has to talk about world issues, in my opinion. I mean, we live here. We're in the world. We're not of the world. And how do you live in the world and deal with people and you don't talk about the political issues, the economical issues, the racial issue that you're going through? Those are real and relevant things to people. And so as we're moving forward, I think that's part of what you would see the church becoming more decentralized. centralized, because again, folks are finding out now and really understanding that you don't go to church, you are the church. You just go to a building, but you are the church. And so right now, the church is scattered, but every time the church scattered, it grew. You know, the church was scattered in Acts too, and it was scattered because they were being persecuted, and because of persecution, they scattered abroad. Well, that was to the advantage, because now the church grew, and so now the church is scattered again, and so church is going to grow.
So we're scattered, but we're also growing online.
We're scattered, but still together.
Yeah.
We're scattered, but we're still together. And I think that was one of the big lessons that a lot of us are learning and understanding, that we may not be under the same roof, but we're still the church, and the church is still functioning, and the church never closed down. Pandemic never closed the church down.
The one place to be.
Also remember being on the beginning of the church. I remember two things that come to my mind right now. I remember asking Pastor Johnson, because see, we had no idea what the service was going like.
Yeah.
We had people who were from Methodist, we had people who were from Pentecostal, we had people from Baptist. I kept saying, what do you think service going to be like? He said, I don't know, because we just don't, we don't know what service is going to be like. And I remember even asking that before the very first service we had at Holiday Inn. We had no fear. We had the layout. We had, we would have our scripture, we have prayer, we have devotion. Me and Pastor Queen were the ones that led the songs, and stuff like that. So it was getting a feel for what the service was going to be like. And my other thing is being in the beginning was, when will people take us serious? I mean, you step out saying you're gonna start a church, and in that day and time, you had your Asbury United, Asbury Broadneck, you had Mount Olive, established churches.
Yeah.
And, who are we to go out and start a First Christian Community Church?
And they know you all.
Yeah. So when will people start taking us seriously? I think people started inviting us over, inviting us to worship with them. But I think it wasn't until people started seeing that we were meeting the needs of the people. When you said, what do you want from our church 30 years from now? I want our church to still be relevant.
Yeah.
Still, Pastor K asked one time, if your church didn't exist, would it be missed? I want us to be as relevant 30 years from now as we are today, whatever means that is. But for First Christian Community Church of Annapolis, that's what I want for us to continue. Because now, I used to go with the feeling of, when people are take us, legitimate. I don't have that anymore, because you mentioned First Christian, and people know what you're talking about.
They
Where
do.
you from? First Christian. Okay. They know our pastor name. They even know our sister pastor name. So it's like, we're real. And it took time to get to that, but it happened.
Brother, you just said something though, when you said about that we didn't know what the service was going to look like. But that you mentioned that, I was like, you're absolutely right. We didn't. We had no idea what service was going to be like. But what I thought was interesting, as we were coming out of the revival, remember last year in January 2020, and we came to the revival, it became very informal. And at the beginning, we would come to church and it was like, who the worship leader going to be this morning? Or because we had no program, we had no structure, and so again, that was 30 years ago. 30 years again later, we went back in that same mode, and I just find it really interesting that I think for now it's a reason why we were, because we were getting ready to go sing home, but folks had to learn how to handle stuff on their own. But yeah, it's when he said that was true. We just we don't know what this worship style. We just figured he did say it would just take on a life of his own, and it did.
Yeah.
And it is now.
Yeah, people used to say we were Baptists in disguise.
So my last thing, I guess I would ask, is there anything that you want to say to the members? I guess, I don't know, leave them with some parting words or
I leave that up to Pastor. No. Now, all I say to the members, you're in a good place. I remember 30 years ago, we were wondering who was going to be members and what the makeup of our church was going to be like. And now to be 30 years later and see just what God had planned for us. And not knowing what He has planned for us 30 years from now. Just know that you're in the right place. And we are so, so grateful to the members that has chosen to work within this ministry and being a part of this ministry.
I guess what I want to say would, first of all, be directed to our original board members. And that is, God called each one of you to be a part of this mission, to be part of God's vision. And we're so grateful that you answered that call. And we know it was on point, we know it was the right call because you were here. And you're still here with your prayers and what you contribute to this congregation. And these 30 years, we would not have made it if the commitment that you have, first of all to God and then to this congregation, we wouldn't be here. So I just thank God every single day for you and for all of the other board members, or everyone who's ever served as a board member. You were part of this. You're part of this vision that God has called. And you know, one thing people would say once Johnson had transitioned, you know, they would say, well, the vision, you know, you're here, you're still carrying on the vision, you're carrying on his vision. First Christian was not Pastor Johnson's vision. First Christian is God's vision, and God gave it to him. And so the visionary never left, because the visionary is God. And what the visionary did was he allowed us now to take the baton and to run with it. And our job now, as original board members and original members, is to prepare the next generation to carry that baton until whenever Jesus comes back and calls all of us home. So with that said, happy Founders Day to all of the original board members. Thank you so much, and we hope you enjoyed this day.
Happy Founders Day, everybody. I guess we're the next generation, so let's see what the next 30 years do for us too. See you guys.